Ayana had never been one to take chances with her heart. But that night, in the dimly lit bar, she couldn't resist the magnetic pull of Woojing. He was a man of undeniable charm, with an air of mystery and a confidence that seemed to draw everyone in. Ayana, an ambitious, independent woman, found herself captivated by his attention. What was meant to be a casual encounter turned into an evening filled with passionate conversation, laughter, and shared moments that felt intimate in a way she hadn't expected. They talked about everything: their dreams, their fears, their ambitions. Woojing listened intently, his eyes focused on her every word, making her feel like the most important person in the room. She had never felt so seen, so understood. It was easy to forget that this was just a one-time thing, a fleeting moment in a city full of distractions. But by the end of the night, Woojing's true nature revealed itself. With a casual smile and a cold kiss on her cheek, he left, disappearing into the night, never to be heard from again. Ayana, still reeling from their passionate night together, was left with nothing but the empty echo of his absence. Her phone remained silent, and her heart ached with confusion. What had she meant to him? Days turned into weeks, and Woojing never reached out. The night they shared became nothing more than a distant memory, one Ayana tried to bury beneath the weight of her responsibilities. But the hurt lingered. Woojing had used her, his charm had worked, and once he got what he wanted, he discarded her without a second thought. Ayana was used to rejection professionally. She'd faced her fair share of setbacks. But this was different. This was personal, and it stung. Determined to move on, Ayana threw herself into her career. She had always been ambitious, but now, the sting of Woojing's rejection fueled her. She promised herself she would rise to the top, never letting a man like him or anyone distract her from her goals. Months passed, and Ayana's hard work began to pay off. She climbed the corporate ladder quickly, earning the respect of her colleagues and mentors. She had become a force to be reckoned with. Her focus, her drive, and her determination made her unstoppable. There was no room for men in her life, especially men like Woojing. Then, one day, she received a call that would change everything. Ayana had been promoted to CEO of the company she had worked tirelessly for. It was a dream come true, a culmination of years of sacrifice and effort. The company's board had recognized her as a leader, someone who could take them to new heights. But the news wasn't the only shock of the day. As Ayana walked into the office, ready to make her mark, she noticed something, or rather, someone who immediately stopped her in her tracks. Woojing was standing there, in the lobby, dressed in a crisp suit. His gaze met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The man who had rejected her months ago, the man who had left her heartbroken and confused, was now in front of her, looking almost as surprised to see her as she was to see him. "Ayana?" he asked, his voice smooth, though there was a hint of tension in his eyes. "Yes?" she replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for a meeting," Woojing said, his eyes flickering with recognition. "I didn't realize you'd be the new CEO." Anna's mind raced. How did this happen? The man who had discarded her was now part of her professional life, her company, and he had no idea what she had become. Her emotions were a mix of surprise, anger, and triumph. This was her moment when everything had come full circle. Woojing, who had treated her like just another woman, was now working for her. But Ayana wasn't the same woman who had fallen for his charm. She had grown, she had evolved, and now she was in control. This wasn't about revenge. It was about power. Her power. As Ayana walked past him, her heart steady, she didn't look back. The woman he had discarded had now become the one who held the keys to everything he had once controlled. The following days after Ayana's promotion passed in a blur. She had barely had time to digest the fact that she was now CEO of the very company where Woojing once held the reins. Her mind was preoccupied with meetings, strategy sessions, and company decisions. The excitement was tinged with an undercurrent of nervousness. She had big shoes to fill, and now there was a whole new layer of complication in the form of Woojing. Though she tried to focus on work, there was no avoiding the fact that Woojing was now a part of her daily life, her staff, and the company she now controlled. The first few days were filled with small, awkward interactions, each one laced with unresolved tension. Woojing was always respectful, maintaining a professional distance. But Ayana could see the same man who had once rejected her, the same arrogance, the same cool demeanor, but now, it was masked by the uncomfortable reality that he was under her command. Ayana's first encounter with him as CEO happened a few days after she settled into her new office. She had been briefed about the upcoming board meeting when she saw Woojing walk into her office without an appointment. Her stomach dropped as she looked up from the papers spread across her desk. He stood at the doorway, as confident and collected as always, but his eyes betrayed a hint of something she couldn't quite place. Regret? Uncertainty? Or was it simply the cold, professional mask he had worn for so long? "Can I help you, Mr. Park?" Ayana's voice was calm, but there was a tightness in her chest. She hadn't expected him to come to her, not so soon, and certainly not without proper notice. His eyes flickered to the door before he stepped inside, closing it gently behind him. "I wanted to speak with you about the upcoming project," Woojing said, his tone all business, but the undercurrent of tension between them was impossible to ignore. "I've been reviewing the proposal, and there are a few changes I'd like to suggest." She nodded, gesturing for him to take a seat, though the power dynamics were now painfully clear. He was no longer in control. She was. "Of course," Ayana said, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Please go ahead." They discussed the project, but Ayana couldn't shake the feeling that every word exchanged between them had more weight than it should. It wasn't just about the project. It was about the past, the night they had shared, and everything that had followed. As Woojing spoke, Ayana found herself distracted by the quiet, underlying tension. His presence in her office, once a source of excitement, now felt like a reminder of how much they had changed, and she wasn't sure whether that change had made them stronger or weaker. After a few minutes, Woojing paused, his eyes meeting hers. "Ayana, I want to make sure we're on the same page here. I respect your position, but this is a sensitive issue. You should know that we're about to face some challenges from upper management. The board may not be fully on board with the direction you're planning." Ayana's pulse quickened. She had been prepared for challenges, but hearing it from Woojing, someone she knew well, felt like a blow. It was like he was reminding her that, despite her new title, she was still vulnerable. "I appreciate your input," she said, maintaining a professional tone. "But I'm confident in my vision for the company. I'll handle it." There was a brief silence before Woojing nodded slowly. "Understood." For a moment, their eyes held, and Ayana could have sworn she saw something in his gaze, a flicker of something that wasn't just professional. But then, just as quickly as it came, it was gone, replaced by the cold mask he wore so well. "Thank you, Mr. Park," Ayana said, breaking the silence. "You're dismissed." He stood, hesitating for a moment before nodding stiffly. "Of course, CEO." As he left the room, Ayana felt a mix of relief and frustration wash over her. She had survived the encounter, but it was clear that the lines between them had never been more blurred. She was in control now, but that didn't mean the past was going to stay buried. As she sat back in her chair, her thoughts wandered to that night with Woojing, to the way he had looked at her, the way he had kissed her. The emotions had always been complicated, but now they felt even more so. She had to stay focused, but every time she saw him, the memories of their shared intimacy threatened to rise to the surface. In the days that followed their awkward encounter in her office, Ayana found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of the past, the rejection, the brief but intense connection felt like a constant undercurrent to every interaction with Woojing. He was no longer just the charming man who had once stolen her heart. Now he was an employee, a subordinate, someone she had to lead and manage. The stakes had changed, but the attraction between them remained undeniable. She had been doing her best to maintain a professional distance. She had her new role to focus on, the company's future to secure, and the board to impress. But every meeting with Woojing felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong move and everything could come crashing down. She couldn't afford to make a mistake, especially now that he was under her leadership. That morning, Ayana had an important meeting with the executive team, and as the CEO, she had to come prepared to discuss major changes. She was about to address the direction of the company when Woojing walked in, looking every bit the professional despite the tension they shared. She forced a smile as he took his seat at the table, but a sense of discomfort lingered between them. Woojing, with his quiet confidence, had always been a force to reckon with in the company. But now, as he sat in front of her, she was in charge. The power dynamic had shifted, and that reality stung, no matter how much she tried to ignore it. Ayana began the meeting, diving into the proposals for expansion and discussing future acquisitions. Woojing remained mostly silent, contributing a few observations and feedback, but his attention never wavered from her. His eyes lingered a moment too long every time she spoke, and it was enough to make Ayana's pulse race. After the meeting, Woojing approached her office, his face unreadable as he knocked on the door. "Ayana," he said, his tone casual but with an edge she couldn't place. "Can we talk?" She didn't want to, but there was no escaping the pull between them. "Sure," she replied, gesturing for him to enter. He walked in slowly, shutting the door behind him with a soft click. "I know we've been trying to keep things professional," Woojing began, his voice steady but his eyes searching hers. "But I can't help but feel like something's being left unsaid." Ayana leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "I'm trying to make this work, Woojing. I'm your boss now, and I'm not going to let our personal history affect my decisions. We have to focus on the company, not on whatever this is." He took a step closer, his presence dominating the space between them. "I understand that," he said quietly, his voice lower than usual. "But it's hard for me to pretend like what we had didn't matter. You're my boss now, but I can't deny how I feel." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Ayana felt a heat rise in her chest, but she fought it down. "We can't mix business with personal feelings. That's dangerous for both of us." Minho's eyes softened, his gaze filled with something more than just the usual professional politeness. "I never wanted to hurt you, Ayana, but I've made my share of mistakes. I won't make the same ones again." For a moment, the walls between them seemed to dissolve, the office feeling smaller as the tension swelled. Ayana could feel her resolve slipping. The man she had once trusted, who had discarded her so easily, was now standing in front of her, vulnerable and sincere. And yet, the professional boundaries were still there, thick, unyielding. "Woojing, this is bigger than us," she said firmly, her voice tinged with frustration. "You're my employee. This can't work. I can't let it work." His gaze didn't waver. "I'm not asking you to ignore your position," he replied, "but I am asking you to think about what we could have. We don't have to let the past define us. Ayana, we can make something new." For a moment, Ayana was torn. She could feel the pull of the man she had once loved, the man she had spent that unforgettable night with, but the weight of responsibility was greater. If she let him in, even for a second, it could destroy everything she had worked for. "I can't," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Not like this. Not now." Woojing's face fell, but he nodded slowly, stepping back toward the door. "I understand," he said quietly, "but just know, I'm not giving up on this. On us." As Woojing left her office, the sound of the door closing behind him felt like the end of something. But deep inside, Ayana knew it wasn't over. There was a storm brewing between them, one that neither of them could ignore forever. The weeks that followed their conversation were a mixture of success and tension. Ayana settled deeper into her role as CEO, making bold moves to reshape the company. Despite the personal struggles weighing on her, she found strength in her work. Every decision she made was driven by a desire to prove herself, to show that she wasn't just the woman who was discarded by Woojing, but someone who could lead and succeed on her own terms. But it was impossible to avoid him. Woojing had become a constant presence in her life, always just a step behind, shadowing her every move. The office was their battleground, and the rules they had tried to set for themselves were slipping through their fingers. It started innocently enough. A few quick meetings, collaborative decisions on the direction of the company, casual conversations about the day-to-day operations. But Woojing had a way of looking at her that made it impossible to keep their history out of the equation. One morning, Ayana entered the conference room early, preparing for a meeting. Woojing was already there, his usual calm demeanor almost unsettling in its intensity. He was reviewing some documents, but when he looked up and saw her walk in, their eyes met. The charged silence between them was palpable. "Good morning, CEO," he said with a hint of a smile, his tone cool but laced with something deeper. It was a greeting that was simultaneously professional and personal, a reminder that no matter how hard they tried to keep it professional, the personal side was always there. "Morning," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady, but she could feel her pulse quicken. She had to stay focused. This meeting was important, and she couldn't let their past interfere with her future. They settled into the meeting, but it was clear to Ayana that Woojing was watching her more than he was paying attention to the discussion. His focus seemed divided, and she could feel his gaze on her even when he wasn't speaking. It was as if he was waiting for the right moment to speak, to say something they had both been holding back. The turning point came when the meeting broke up, and Ayana was walking back to her office. She wasn't prepared when Woojing caught up with her in the hallway. "Can we talk for a moment?" he asked, his voice steady but with an edge she couldn't ignore. She stopped in her tracks, the weight of his presence forcing her to turn. "What's going on, Woojing?" she asked, trying to sound unaffected, but it was impossible to ignore the tension building between them. "We've been through this already," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but I can't keep pretending like I don't feel it. Ayana, what we have is more than just professional, and you know it." Her heart skipped a beat. She had been trying to convince herself that this was just a phase, a moment that would pass. But deep down, she knew Woojing was right. Their connection had always been more than just a one-night stand. "I told you already," Ayana said, her voice quieter now. "I'm trying to keep this professional. You're my subordinate, Woojing. Nothing else matters." His face softened. "I'm not asking you to forget everything, or pretend it didn't happen. I just can't deny that I still feel something for you. That I always have." The words hung in the air, and Ayana felt her defenses crack. It was the truth. She had never stopped caring for him, even after everything he had done. But could she trust him again? Could she risk it all for someone who had once discarded her so easily? Before she could respond, Woojing stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "If you can't see it yet, I'll wait. I'll wait until you're ready. But I'm not giving up on us." Ayana stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. It was all so complicated. There was love, there was betrayal, and there was now a new power dynamic between them that they could neither deny nor ignore. For a moment, she was lost in the possibility of what could be, of what they could still be. But the reality of their professional roles and their responsibilities slammed her back into focus. "We can't do this," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. "We can't. Not here, not now. We've crossed too many lines already." He didn't say anything for a moment, his expression a mixture of understanding and frustration. Then he nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "All right, Ayana. But you know where I stand." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Ayana standing there, her heart heavy with the knowledge that their feelings for each other were now undeniable, but whether they could ever act on them was a different matter. Ayana sat at the head of the conference table, the weight of the company's future resting heavily on her shoulders. She had always prided herself on being composed, strategic, and sharp, but today, the room felt different. Woojing was sitting across from her, his presence impossible to ignore, even if they hadn't spoken since their emotional confrontation in the hallway. He was supposed to be her subordinate, but the familiarity between them made every glance feel like a subtle challenge. She couldn't shake the feeling that Woojing was testing her, waiting for her to slip up, to show any sign of weakness. The meeting was about a new project, the company's next big step in an expansion. Ayana had come up with a solid plan, one that had been reviewed by her team. But as soon as the floor opened for discussion, she saw Woojing's sharp eyes narrowing as he read through the documents. I believe we need to reconsider the timeline, Woojing said, his voice cool and calculated. This is a very aggressive proposal. Rushing into this could jeopardize the company's long-term strategy. Ayana felt her jaw tighten. He wasn't just offering feedback. He was challenging her authority publicly, in front of the board members. It was a move that was both professional and personal. He knew the company's history better than anyone, but he also knew the impact of his words. Woojing, I appreciate your insight, she said, keeping her tone level. But I've already taken into account the risks. This is a calculated move, not a rush. Our competitors are ahead, and we need to move quickly if we want to stay relevant. There was a brief silence before Woojing spoke again, his voice measured but firm. The risks you're mentioning, are they really worth the price? We need more data before we move forward. Her pulse quickened. He was questioning her plan, her leadership. Ayana had always been confident in her abilities, but Woojing's challenge stung more than she expected. This was not just about business. He was testing her as the CEO, and as a woman who had fought hard to get to where she was. The board members exchanged glances. The tension in the room was palpable, and Ayana could feel every eye on her. If she didn't respond assertively, it could undermine her authority. She took a deep breath, her mind racing for a solution. I understand your concerns, Woojing, she said, her voice calm and commanding. But this is a decision that needs to be made with confidence. We can't afford to wait. I've already taken the necessary precautions. If we hesitate now, we'll fall behind. She met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. For a brief moment, it seemed as if Woojing was about to challenge her again, but he hesitated. Instead, he nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of respect and something else, something she couldn't quite read. Very well, he said, but I would suggest we keep an eye on the metrics just to be safe. Ayana felt a rush of relief flood over her, but she didn't let it show. She had won this round. Woojing had made his point, but she had held her ground. Later that evening, after the meeting had ended, Ayana was reviewing her notes in her office when Woojing knocked on the door. Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly composed herself, the professional facade firmly back in place. Come in, she called out, glancing up as he entered. He stood in the doorway for a moment, his expression unreadable. I just wanted to say that was a good call in there, he said, his voice surprisingly warm. I underestimated your confidence. She raised an eyebrow, not letting the compliment slip past unnoticed. You're not used to being challenged, are you? He smirked slightly, stepping into the room. I'll admit I didn't expect it, but I'm learning that I can't always be in control. There was a pause and Ayana met his gaze. There was an intensity between them, a pull that neither of them could escape. The air in the room seemed to thicken with unsaid words, emotions that had been building for weeks. Woojing, she began, her voice steady but laced with a mix of frustration and longing. We can't keep doing this. I need you to trust me as CEO. We can't have personal feelings clouding our judgment. He nodded, his expression serious. I do trust you, Ayana, but it's hard to let go of the past. You know that. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control the emotions threatening to surface. We need to be professionals. If we can't do that, everything we've worked for will fall apart. As Woojing left her office that evening, the silence between them felt heavier than ever. Ayana had faced her first real test as CEO and she had passed. But the personal conflict between her and Woojing was far from resolved. The boundaries they had once set were slipping, and the more they tried to keep their distance, the more they seemed to blur. The pressure was mounting for Ayana as CEO. Every decision she made, every step she took, felt like it was under a microscope. She had worked so hard to get here, and now that she had everything she wanted, the consequences of being a woman in a high-powered position began to feel even heavier. But it wasn't just the job that weighed on her. It was Woojing, his constant presence in her life, the unresolved emotions between them, and the complications of their past. Despite their professional roles, despite her attempts to keep things clean and orderly, she could feel the undercurrent of something much deeper. The board meeting that afternoon was a pivotal one. Ayana had been preparing for days, finalizing the company's strategy for the upcoming quarter, and she couldn't afford any distractions. Woojing, as always, sat at the back of the room, observing everything with his usual quiet intensity. But today, there was something different in his eyes. The lingering tension from their last conversation was still there, but it seemed like something more like a storm that was just waiting to break. After the meeting, Ayana sat in her office, reviewing the meeting notes, when she received an unexpected visit. The door to her office opened softly, and Woojing walked in. She wasn't surprised, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. "I need to talk to you," Woojing said, his voice low but firm. He closed the door behind him, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence was thick with unspoken words. "What's going on, Woojing?" Ayana asked, trying to maintain her composure, but the rising tension between them was unmistakable. "I've been doing some thinking," Woojing began, pacing slowly in front of her desk. "I know we agreed to keep things professional, but there's something I need to tell you. Something about my past." Ayana's heart skipped a beat. Woojing's past, something about it had always been a mystery, something he rarely spoke of. "I'm listening," she said, her voice steady, though she was already bracing herself for what was to come. Woojing hesitated before sitting down across from her. He ran his hand through his hair, his eyes distant. "Before I came to this company, I was involved with someone who, let's just say it wasn't a healthy relationship. They had a lot of influence in the industry. I made some mistakes, got tangled in things I shouldn't have been a part of. I tried to cut ties with them, but I'm still dealing with the aftermath." Ayana's pulse quickened as she tried to process his words. "What do you mean, Woojing? Are you in danger?" He didn't answer immediately, instead looking at her with a deep, conflicted gaze. "I'm not in physical danger, but there are connections. People who are still trying to control the company, manipulate things from behind the scenes. They don't want to let me go, and I'm worried that this might affect you, our company, everything you've worked for." Ayana leaned forward, her mind racing. The stakes were higher than she had realized. The man she had let into her life, who had once discarded her so easily, was now tied to a past that threatened everything she had built. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Woojing met her gaze, his eyes filled with regret. "Because I didn't want you to be blindsided. I thought I could handle it on my own, but now that we're involved, I can't keep these secrets from you. I'm afraid that if they find out about us, it could destroy both of us. The company could fall apart, and so could everything we're trying to build." Ayana sat in silence, processing what he had said. She had always known there was more to Woojing than met the eye, but this was a different kind of threat, one that had the potential to destroy everything she had worked for. The tension between them, their growing feelings, their past had all suddenly taken on a new dimension. "I appreciate you telling me this," Ayana said, her voice steady, though she was shaken. "But I need to know that you're not hiding anything else, that you're not still involved with these people. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about the future of the company." Woojing nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm not involved with them anymore, but they're still pulling strings. I won't let them ruin you, Ayana. You're the only one who can stop them now. You're the only one who has the power to push through." For the rest of the day, Ayana felt like she was walking in a fog. Woojing's confession had opened a door she wasn't sure she was ready to walk through. The secrets of his past were no longer just his burden. They were now hers to carry, too. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that her feelings for him were clouding her judgment. Could she trust him completely? Was he telling the truth? Or was this just another layer of manipulation? Woojing had been a part of her past, a painful part, but now he was here again, offering her the chance to build something new. Could she truly forgive him for what he had done? Or was this all just a dangerous game of cat and mouse? The days after Woojing's confession were nothing short of chaotic. Ayana had always prided herself on being able to control every aspect of her life. But now, with Woojing's revelations hanging over them, She felt like she was walking on a tightrope. She couldn't ignore the fact that the very man she had trusted, and who had once discarded her, was now entangled in a dangerous web that threatened everything she had worked for. The pressure to succeed as CEO had never been higher. The board, who had once placed their full trust in Ayana, now questioned her judgment. Woojing's past connections had already started to cause ripples, and Ayana knew that if she didn't act quickly, the whole company could be jeopardized. That afternoon, a critical board meeting was scheduled. Ayana had been working tirelessly to prepare, but every step of the way, she could feel the weight of Woojing's past hanging over her decisions. He was still part of the team, part of her professional life, but the tension between them was becoming unbearable. Their interactions had become more strained, and Ayana could feel his undeniable presence in every meeting. As the meeting began, Ayana took her seat at the head of the table, her hands clasped in front of her. The room was filled with board members, some looking at her with curiosity, others with skepticism. Woojing entered last, his usual calm demeanor masking the tension between them. He avoided her gaze, but there was something in his eyes that she couldn't ignore, a silent plea, or perhaps guilt. "Ayana, we need to address the elephant in the room," said Mr. Harding, one of the senior board members. His tone was blunt, and his eyes never left her. "There are concerns regarding Woojing's past associations. We cannot ignore the risks involved with his ties to the people he mentioned. How do we move forward with someone who is a potential liability?" Ayana felt the weight of the question as the room turned to her. It wasn't just about Woojing, it was about her leadership. Her decision would either cement her position as CEO or destroy her credibility. "I understand the concerns," she began, her voice steady but unwavering. "But Woojing has been forthright with me about his past. He is no longer involved with those people, and he is committed to moving forward in a professional capacity." The room fell silent as the board members exchanged glances. Mr. Harding raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "That may be true, Ayana, but we cannot afford to take risks based on someone's word alone. We need to see actions, not just promises. Can you guarantee that there won't be further complications?" Woojing shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Ayana could see him suppressing the urge to speak, but this was her moment. She wasn't going to let him undermine her authority. "I can't guarantee everything will be perfect," she said, her eyes locking with Mr. Harding's. "But what I can guarantee is that Woojing has proven himself to be an asset to this company. He's a talented strategist, and his work speaks for itself. If we give in to fear now, we risk losing valuable people. We can't afford to let past mistakes dictate our future." The room grew quiet, and Woojing finally met her gaze across the table. His expression was soft, but there was a sense of admiration in his eyes. For a fleeting moment, Ayana wondered if their professional relationship would ever be just that professional. But then, the silence was broken by Mr. Harding. "We'll have to make some serious decisions," he said, his tone softening. "But we trust your judgment, Ayana. You're the CEO now, and it's your call." That night, Ayana sat alone in her office, staring out the window at the city lights. Her decision had been bold, perhaps too bold. Woojing had been a liability in the eyes of the board, but Ayana had stood by him. She had risked her own credibility for him, for their future. The door to her office opened, and Woojing entered, his footsteps quiet against the floor. He stood silently for a moment, waiting for her to acknowledge him. "Thank you for doing that," he said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. "I know it wasn't easy." Ayana looked up at him, her heart heavy. "I don't know if it was the right choice, Woojing, but I couldn't let you take the fall for your past. We're not the same people we were then, but there's no going back now." He nodded, stepping closer. "I know, and I'll prove to you that I'm not that man anymore. You don't have to worry about me." She stared at him for a long moment, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. The room was charged with an intensity, the pull between them growing stronger with every word. They were crossing boundaries now professional and personal. The lines were no longer as clear as they once were. "I hope you do, Woojing," she said quietly, "because if this doesn't work, It's not just your career at stake anymore. It's mine too. The stakes had never been higher. Ayana had always prided herself on being in control of her career, her life, and most importantly, her emotions. But as the days passed, she found herself more and more entangled in Woojing's world. The tension between them was palpable, and despite the walls they had tried to erect around their professional relationship, the connection they shared only deepened. But as much as Ayana wanted to trust Woojing, there were still shadows lingering from his past, shadows that threatened to unravel everything they had worked for. Started with a phone call, one that caught Ayana completely off guard. She had just finished a meeting with the board when her assistant delivered the news that would change everything. "Ayana, you need to hear this," her assistant said, sounding urgent. "There's a report about Woojing circulating in the company. It's about his past involvement with some of the former investors. You need to see this." Ayana's stomach churned as she took the document. The words leapt off the page like daggers, and her heart sank with every line she read. Woojing had been more involved with the shady investors than he had admitted. In fact, it seemed like he had been playing both sides, acting as a mole, feeding information back to the very people who had once tried to control the company. She couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about his past mistakes anymore. It was about deception and betrayal, and she had trusted him. She had risked everything for him. That evening, Ayana asked Woojing to meet her in her office. The weight of the documents pressed against her chest, but she had to confront him. This was the moment when everything would come to a head. As soon as he entered, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Woojing, we need to talk." His brow furrowed, sensing the shift in her tone. "What's wrong?" She handed him the report, watching as his face drained of color when he saw what was written. The silence in the room was deafening as he scanned the pages. The truth of his past laid bare before them. This isn't what you think," he began, his voice shaking. "No," Ayana's voice was firm, cutting him off. "You lied to me. You didn't tell me about your involvement with those people. You told me you had cut ties with them, but you didn't. You've been feeding information to them, Woojing. You've been using me and the company as a pawn in your game." He stepped back, looking like he had been physically struck. "Ayana, please let me explain. I never intended for this to happen. I was trying to protect you. Protect us." Her chest tightened, and her eyes filled with frustration and hurt. "Protect us? By lying to me? By hiding the truth?" She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I trusted you, Woojing, and now I feel like I don't know who you are anymore." Woojing took a step forward, desperation in his eyes. "Ayana, listen to me. I didn't want to drag you into this. I've made mistakes, but I never intended for you to be hurt. The things I did, the choices I made were to protect you from these people. I thought if I kept them at bay, kept you safe, that you would never have to know the truth. But now I see how wrong I was." Her heart wavered for a moment. She could see the pain in his eyes, but the betrayal still stung like a fresh wound. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Woojing. You've put us all at risk. And not just the company of me." He stood there, silent for a moment, as if struggling to find the right words. Then softly he spoke. "I've never wanted to hurt you, Ayana. Not now, not ever. But I'm afraid I've done just that. I'll take full responsibility for my actions. If you want me to leave the company, I'll do it. If you want me gone from your life, I'll understand." For a moment, Ayana didn't know how to respond. The hurt was still fresh, but her mind was clouded with the complex web of emotions she was feeling. Could she forgive him? Could she trust him again after all the lies and deceit? Ayana stood up, her heart pounding. She needed space to think. "I don't know, Woojing. Right now, I don't know if I can trust you, but I need time." Woojing nodded, his face full of regret. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." As he left her office, Ayana felt like the ground beneath her feet had shifted. "I won't forget," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "But we can't go back." The following days after Woojing's departure were a whirlwind for Ayana. The company had adjusted. The board had begun moving forward with the new leadership strategy she had outlined, and the tension that had haunted her every step seemed to dissipate. Yet, despite all the progress, a part of her felt lost, like a vital piece of her had been pulled away, leaving a hollow space. Woojing's exit was swift. He had cleared his desk, handed over his responsibilities, and left the company in the quietest way possible. No dramatic goodbyes, no final apologies. He simply walked away, and Ayana couldn't decide if that was what she wanted or feared. It was a week later when Ayana received an unexpected call. She had been working late in her office when her phone buzzed. The name on the screen made her heart skip a beat. "Woojing," she whispered to herself. Her hand trembled as she answered the call. "Ayana." His voice came through, steady but still tinged with emotion. "I hope I didn't interrupt anything important." Her heart raced, but she kept her tone neutral. "No, just reviewing some reports. How are you?" There was a long pause on the other end. Woojing seemed to be gathering his words carefully before he spoke again. "I'm doing all right. I'm not going to drag this out. I just wanted to say thank you for the chance you gave me, for the trust you showed in me, even when I didn't deserve it." Ayana closed her eyes, a rush of emotion flooding through her. The quiet sincerity in his voice made her feel vulnerable, like she had opened a door she wasn't sure she could close. "I made a mistake, Ayana," Woojing continued. "I hurt you, and I can never take that back. But I need you to know I'm not the same man I was when I walked out of your life the first time. I've changed, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that to you, even if it means walking away completely." The words struck her like a blow. Woojing was right. He wasn't the same man who had left her heartbroken. But the truth was, she wasn't the same woman either. She had grown. She had become stronger, more confident, and she had learned the value of independence. But Woojing had been a significant part of her life, one she couldn't easily forget, no matter how hard she tried. She took a deep breath. "What are you asking for, Woojing?" There was a silence on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I'm not asking for a second chance. I'm asking for your forgiveness for the hurt I caused. And if you can't forgive me, I'll accept that too. I just wanted you to know the truth." Ayana felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she fought them back. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the passion, and the unresolved feelings all seemed to come crashing down on her. She didn't know what to say, how to respond to a man who had been part of both her best and worst memories. "You don't have to ask for forgiveness, Woojing," she said quietly, her voice steady. "You were part of my life. You still are. And maybe one day we can find a way to move past everything. But right now, I need to focus on this company. I need to focus on myself." There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his tone was gentle. "I understand, Ayana. I don't expect anything from you anymore. I just needed to tell you how much you meant to me. You always will." Ayana nodded, even though she knew he couldn't see it. "Goodbye, Woojing." The line clicked, and she sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of the finality in the air. She didn't know what the future held for her and Woojing. There was still so much hurt between them, so many unresolved feelings. But one thing was clear: Ayana was stronger now. She had built this company, her reputation, and her life from the ground up. She had made it without him, and that was something she could never forget. Days passed, and life at the company slowly began to return to normal. Ayana kept her focus on what mattered: the business, her team, and her vision for the future. She had learned the hard way that sometimes the people you love most can hurt you, but that didn't mean you had to let them destroy you. One late evening, as she was about to leave the office, she found a package on her desk. It was small, neatly wrapped with a simple note attached. "Anna, I wanted to give you something for the work you've done. You're an incredible woman, and I'll always be proud of you. You've made your mark on this world. Don't forget that." The note was signed Woojing. Ayana stared at the package for a moment, then slowly opened it. Inside was a small silver keychain shaped like a compass. It was symbolic of the journey she had taken, the choices she had made, and the path ahead. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, please like and share. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more updates. Drop a comment with your location so I can create more stories just for you.